Hello, my name is Simurdak, and I'm going to be presenting our poster, Controlled Chaos, Organizing and Working with Extant Archaeological Collections. This poster is a cumulative work of 6 students, myself, Simurdak, Maria Kovach, Jeremy Cobb, Kevin Menzia, Kiley, Radovich, and Lauren Otto. Maria and I are graduate students with the Cultural and Environmental Resource Management program, and Jeremy, Kevin, Kiley, and Lauren are all students with the Department of Anthropology and Museum Studies. This work was done under the direction of our faculty advisor, Dr. Patrick T. McCutcheon. I'll start with the abstract. Excavated more than 50 years ago, the Grissom site, also known as 45KT301, has yielded a collection of tens of thousands of artifacts housed in 60 archival boxes. Pieced together across several field seasons by dozens of students, the Grissom collection is riddled with uncertainties. Though many of these were addressed through a rehabilitation of the collection in the mid-2000s, and a thesis exploring the history of the investigation, students wishing to complete research on this collection still face a variety of unique challenges, including unclear labels, misfiled artifacts, and compounding transcription errors. Through the work of 6 students across over 300 hours of lab time, many of these issues were identified, articulated, and addressed. This poster summarizes some of the specific concerns one might face when conducting research on collections such as Grissom, and discusses how problems were anticipated and addressed, where errors occurred, and how to better prevent such mistakes in the future. The practices discussed here will be useful for any researcher tackling a collection of similar scale and history, and provide a better understanding of how to make the most of a collection and protect it for future use. So I want to explain a little bit about what exactly it was that we were doing with this collection in winter of 2022. As a part of my thesis research, it was important to be able to count all of a specific type of artifact within this collection. That artifact type being predominantly what we call debitage, the sort of chipped stone that is the result of the production of stone tools. This is work that I had actually started for a research project in my undergrad, but the scale of what remained to be done was much larger than I could do by myself. So we set to work as a team, and it was my job to scale up what I had been doing as an individual to something that was going to be repeatable for multiple students. To make sure that we were getting accurate counts, I provided everyone with what you see here, these grid sheets that were numbered up to 100. With the intent being that each box on the grid would be filled with 5 pieces, and the number superimposed behind the box would indicate how many pieces you had if that box was full. One of the first issues that we sort of really ran into is that this was not the most clear sometimes, and it was sometimes the case that the numbering system was a little misread. So, for example, if you had numbered up to 40 and then put 1 in the adjacent box, most often we would write 41, but in some cases we would miswrite 46. Another error was, or common, not common, but mistake that we identified was that these sheets had an area to tally hundreds in case you had a bag with more than 100 pieces and didn't want to fill out multiple sheets with stacks of debitage. And in some instances, students forgot to mark the hundreds place when they ultimately entered their count on their final sheets, which is what's pictured here. We worked with a complex system of sort of color-coded highlighters to make sure that we were keeping track of what we were doing together, but not stepping on each other's toes or redoing work. So this is an example of a part of one of Maria's sheets. Blue is indicating work that's already been done by another student. Each sheet has the box number, the catalog range number, the unit numbers that we'll be working with, and then the catalogs from each unit. Green indicates bags with more than one piece. Orange indicates bags with obsidian, which is relevant for my research. Yellow indicates formed tools, and pink, not pictured here, is specifically for projectile points. Counts then got written down to the right of the catalog number, and all of this work, which was over 90,000 pieces across about 5,500 catalog bags, was eventually entered into a spreadsheet. One of the things that it was important to be able to do was to make sure that we were correctly assigning the data that we were generating to the right units. And in some instances, it was not always clear which unit was correct. In this case, you can see here that one of the units is M0E, but there's actually an adjacent unit, M1W. However, this abbreviation was assigned after the majority of the field work on this unit was done. And in the fields records, there is a lot of reference to an M0W unit. And it was only through very carefully looking through scans of the excavation records associated with this collection that we were able to track down some of these mistakes. In this instance, it's quite literally the case that we can see the 0 written in MO0 that has been erased and a 1 written over it. So we can pretty confidently say that we know if a bag says M0W, that it should actually be M1W. So to get a look at what some of our most common mistakes did to our error rate, we have sort of two charts here. The first is showing sort of the range of our counts for a selection of bags. There's 2 bags randomly selected from each person on the team plus 2 more. We can see that 9065 here has a very large error rate, and that's because this is one of the bags where that hundreds place wasn't accurately marked. Similarly, we can see some of these other bags, 9709 and 7743, have a slightly larger than average error rate. This could be a transcription error. It's also likely that this is an experience error. One of the things that I told students when we started was to only count something that was big enough to be analyzed. But the amount of experience between each of us as students really influenced what we saw as worth counting. And that led to some of this sort of error, interoperator error. Another thing to look at is specifically our counts per person. Sorry, this image is a little bit crunchy. We can see that some students that have these higher error rates, this is again the 2 students that made the 100s counting error, and they did catch it, but we wanted to preserve the original mistake for the sake of this poster. We can see students who their understanding of what could be counted changed over time, and then some students who counted and repeated their own standards very consistently. Each of us offered a sort of reflection on what this research process was like. So I'm going to zoom in on each of these and give you a chance to pause and read them at your own leisure. And we'll be starting with mine. And here's Maria's. Here's Kevin's reflection. Here's Jeremy's. Here's Kiley's reflection. And here's Lauren's. So just to quickly review the results of this work. Though great efforts were made to reduce error, a few predictable problems arose over the course of the research. Inter-user error was most likely to occur where levels of experience were noticeably different, such as knowing what was large enough to analyze and thus worth counting. Errors also arose where ambiguity in the directions and tools provided resulted in mistakes that were not obvious and therefore difficult to catch, such as the ±5 and ±100 grid counting errors. Collection upkeep was an art as much as a skill, as it required interpretation of previous work, including efforts to assess the quote-unquote most likely error that could have been made without making further mistakes, inaccurate corrections. Only through careful work, precise record keeping, and active communication was error avoided. And then finally, I just want to do our acknowledgements. We specifically want to thank our advisor, Dr. McCutcheon, for his guidance and direction during this work. He was really actively involved in this process, and it was really helpful for all of us. We also want to thank Lisa Matthews for her help generating the statistical reports on the count error, Dr. Lubinsky for his help accessing the collection and associated records, and Tanner Van Switendell for his help restoring records collections. So that's our poster. Please comment if you have any questions, and thank you for your time.